Hello and welcome to Never Heard It, the show where I review classic albums that I never got around to listening to. And this week I brought along a friend. She is the DJ on Brooklyn's Newtown Radio, Thursdays from 9 to 11 p.m. She is also the co-founder of We Got Next, which is a DJ workshop designed to educate up-and-coming DJs that don't always get represented in the mainstream. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shi Shi. What's up?
Hi, I loved that intro. That felt good. And I'm happy to be here.
Good. So today we're talking about ESG's debut album, Come Away With ESG. And you kind of broke the rules with this one. I typically like to ask people to review an album that came out when they were a teenager in the early 20s. You were very adamant about talking about this album. So before I even ask why you haven't heard this album, I just want to know, like, what is it about ESG that made you really want to talk about this one?
I think as I've come into my DJ self, my childhood and the music that I grew up listening to as a kid has kind of come more into the forefront of that. And a lot of that was just like kind of stripped down punk, and that comes from being raised by just like me and my dad. And he would play dance and like the ESG classics all the time growing up, but that was one album that I just never heard. And I think like part of my like formation of my musical identity was like him waking me up like late at night, like taking me to a punk show like as a kid, because it was just the two of us. And ESG has influenced music coming out of the punk scene. It's also influenced a ton of music coming out of the dance scene. And for me, especially like on my radio shows, like that intersection just kind of feels like me. So I think that's why.
So why haven't you heard this album then? Like, it seems like you would have.
I think that they had the two EPs. They had the two EPs come out before Come Away With ESG. And a lot of the songs on Come Away With ESG are on those two EPs. So I didn't actually even know that it existed. I think I was thinking about this when I was like looking at the questions. I didn't know that it existed until the reissue. And I also then like don't really even know. Besides that, I think like as DJs, we're just like conditioned to listening to so much music all the time. And then, yeah, I wasn't born yet when this album came out. And so I really grew up in like playlist, and I mean, I grew up in album culture, but really quickly, I think it turned into playlist culture. And now like in kind of the uptick of DJing, now it's really about mix culture. And I think that I attribute a lot of that into why I haven't listened to the album in full all the way through.
It feels like you're probably familiar with, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of this album already, right?
Yeah, there's like a handful of it that I'm pretty sure like half of it is instrumental and half of it has lyrics, which I love. And the ones that I hadn't heard were mostly the instrumentals.
So let's just talk about the album. Was there any specific songs that really jumped out to you?
I'm gonna look up a track list right now. I really loved the instrumentals from Chastel to About You and It's All Right all the way through. That really stood out to me, talking about playlist culture. I think like one of the most beautiful things about listening to an album all together is that it doesn't necessarily have to blend. Whereas like when I'm making a mix, I'm so focused on if there is a transition or a quiet piece at the end of the song that's really planned out. I know the same thing happens when recording an album, but like I think back then it's just, this is like a collection of good songs that tell a story. And I think having the instrumentals kind of wedged within the lyrics does the same thing that I aim to do when I'm creating a mix. So I really loved that section. I also kind of like was not reintroduced, but to like hear Dance and Come Away and Moody like within an album did something different than listening to them as singles. That was really cool. Yeah. I don't know. It was good all the way through.
Yeah, it is. I do, because as I've gotten older, I kind of gotten away from just like listening to album. Like typically I listen to an album and then once I hear it, it goes into like my shuffle. And I'm just listening to everything, and I don't always get to sit down and just listen to an album, even though I may love it. but I typically only listen to like, a song here and a song here. So it's always good to go back and just listen to a full album.
Yeah.
Um,
I, I think it's something that like, I don't know, maybe another fault of capitalism, but to like really listen to an album takes time and like
mhm,
a commitment to see it as a whole piece.
mhm.
I've talked to my roommate about this a few times and he's a musician and like he was just like, yeah, I love albums for that reason. And that stuck with me. And I try to do that while making mixes, but I don't really think making mixes demand the same thing.
I don't know a lot about ESG because they're not a particularly popular band, unfortunately. And when you first said ESG, I'm a Texan. So there's a rapper from Texas in Houston. His name is ESG. So when you first said that, that was my first thought. I was like, really? ESG? Okay. Like when I was a kid, he had this album called Swangin' and Bangin'. But they have a really weird history with hip hop.
Mm.
UFO is a song that just gets sampled a million times, and they didn't always get paid for that type of thing. And they even made an EP called
Sample credits
uh
don't pay the bills.
yeah, yeah. Also, how they made music was they tried to take. They always talk about the James Brown breakdown, like in the middle of a song where it's just drums and bass, and they're just like going off for a minute. And they decided to make that the whole song, and that's why they sound the way they do, which is more or less what hip hop is. Like you take the breakdown and you just extend it. That's what hip hop is. And I thought that was really interesting and kind of sad that they don't get as much credit as a lot of other artists do.
Yeah. I mean, I know part of the story about that is that after Come Away with ESG, the record label who put it out sort of diminished. And so that unfortunately took away, I think, from them getting credit where credit was due. It's a band of women. I don't know if that has something to do with it. Black women from New York, like their sound has a huge influence on hip hop, but like also to me, like as a house DJ and like when I think about things that I want to do for my radio show, like I don't necessarily want to play a house set for 2 hours on the radio because nobody's just listening for 2 hours in a club.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I have my close friends who are going to do that for me, but like that's not the same. And so I feel like they're one of the few bands that I know and can always turn to that have a sound that can like bridge that gap. If I want to like play a hip hop song after house song, I can play an ESG song in the middle. Or if I want to play like a punk song or a new wave song, which I like to do, ESG can do that. So I think like they have that ties like to hip hop, but then they're also kind of in that in between space for other genres as well, which I'm like always looking for things that sound like that and can do that as a DJ.
Yeah, when I was listening to one of the things that really hit me is that this is like minimalist dance music, which I
Yeah.
can't name anyone else that does that. Like it's like punk, but you it's meant for you to dance to,
Yeah.
which is very unique. Is there anything about this album that you didn't like?
Mm. No, but I think no, but I also like thoroughly enjoyed the process of just like
Mhm.
getting high on my floor and like listening to it. And so like no, I love how short it is. That's something that I like really love. Like I love just like listen to a half-hour album and go.
Mhm.
That's like how some people I'm always working hard to like if I have a half hour, I don't need to scroll Instagram that whole time. I can like read a book or hear like listen to an album. And so I just like really loved that that was like part of the process for me. Cause like I think in like the culture of like immediacy, sometimes even saying like I'm gonna sit down and listen to this new album or something of an artist that I really want to listen to feels daunting.
Mhm.
Um, and this just didn't because I was excited for the project and also because it was short.
Awesome. I enjoyed the album, but it is an album that it feels like you'd have like they seem like a band that's much more interesting to see live. Maybe
I
it's
really,
because I wasn't on my floor high.
yeah,
Maybe.
maybe you should do a round two.
All right, I'll do that next time. So, is there anything that you want to talk to the people about? Anything that you have coming up?
Yeah, like Lee said, I do a radio show every other Thursday out of Newtown Radio in Bushwick, Brooklyn. I'm new, so some people say that's East Williamsburg, but I don't know. They tell me it's Bushwick.
Nobody outside of New York knows.
I know. And so, yeah, that's 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 to 11 out here. And then keep an eye out for stuff from We Got Next. You can follow us on Instagram at We Got Next PDX. We have some digital events this summer for kind of intro to DJing stuff and kind of pop up We Got Next events. And yeah, that's about it. I'm just so excited for things to slowly open up and like we can kind of integrate our full selves back into what we like to do again soon.
So have you heard Come Away with ESG? Are you still bumping to this day? I'm going to keep talking about albums until I run out. Until then, we are two people on the internet that don't know everything. Peace.